Hello and welcome to episode 4, series 3 of Child in Time, Growing Up in the 60s. On many occasions when I'm talking to old classmates, the conversation might turn to discussing our teachers at school. Usually it is the infants or grade school teachers that dominate memories. Perhaps it's because that in primary school, unlike high school, you have only one teacher for the entire year. A year is a long time when you are small. Many times, partly due to this podcast and also having been able to reconnect with some ex-schoolmates, many have confided to me that they have had a particular teacher that had impacted them significantly. One might say they loved a certain teacher, yet another classmate might have hated the same teacher with a potency that has scarcely diminished over the years. Some of the comments about individual teachers have been very negative, to say the least. There are some very positive memories, of course. For example, I said that in the Showtime episode, I had an exceptional time as lead performer in our 1 year for musical productions. Now, obviously, all this is far from a comprehensive scientific survey, but there are many people who have good reason to highlight the experience with a particular teacher from their childhood for many reasons. Can you? I thought so. Now, the following details my time in 5th class, now known as Year 5. I recount events that involve the harsh treatment of a child. So this episode is not in any way as lighthearted as other episodes. So that if that might be a problem for you, I suggest you read the transcript of the episode. Regular listeners will recall the episode called Showtime. It was episode 6, series 2. This episode pretty much leads straight on from that. To summarise, at the end of Year 4, my class had performed a very well-rehearsed and very well-received mini-concert at our end-of-year speech night. I was one of the main performers. Our very musically inclined teacher had ensured I had had a great year, so it was onward to 5th class. I didn't know much about my new teacher, but I had seen him on playground duty many times. He was tall, thin, with short cropped curly hair, but he had very prominent bushy eyebrows. He wore, like all male teachers at my school, the standard white collared shirt and tie. His facial expression appeared fixed, and he was about as animated as an Easter Island statue. Before being placed in his class, I didn't know anything about him, but there was one thing that did set his class apart. All the primary school classes, that is 3rd to 6th class, were located in classrooms in the main 2-storey building. All except my new teacher's class. His classroom was at the far end of the school, in a 2-classroom demountable block. His class was all out on its own. Not long into the first term, it became apparent that this teacher was something of a Renaissance man. His span of interests and forward thinking was out of the ordinary for 1965. He would often have the urge to call the class to put pens down and listen as he would begin to talk on one of his favourite topics. He loved astronomy and anything to do with flight. He was a licensed pilot and would take chosen members of the class on flights from time to time. Technology and innovations were another theme. And he talked so much about road safety and how it could be improved that I began to suspect that perhaps he had been personally affected by a road accident. He loved technology and the advances that beckoned as the computer age dawned. It was known that he was married, but had no children. He never spoke of his personal life, ever. How old was he? Gee, that's difficult. I've had guesses that he was in his early 30s or even as old as 50. My guess is that he was around 40. The school year started and there we were, sat in the classroom in our pairs, invariably two boys together or two girls sitting together. None of my previous teachers had displayed anything like the scope of knowledge as this man. He'd just lean back in his chair and riff on whatever was on his mind. Despite all this, he did present as, well, a bit scary. He exuded nothing approaching warmth or humour. In the vernacular of the time, you could say he came across as an uptight kind of guy. His standard form of administering physical punishment when deemed necessary, and that was quite often, was to stand behind a student, put one hand on the child's shoulder, then bend down and slap the child's calf. Often a red palm print would remain on the calf for an hour or so, long after the initial pain had subsided. He did not use the cane, and his calf smack was his unique way of inflicting pain to punish. I have no knowledge of any other teacher using this strange technique to inflict pain. I cannot recall any event, incident, or incidents or encounter or anything really that precipitated the teacher's focus on me. For the first few months, I was just another kid in the class, just another 10-year-old. This teacher was the guy in charge, and we did exactly what we were told, full stop. The previous year, my new teacher would have been at the concert and he would have seen me sing and perform a couple of times. He approached me once and asked me to confirm, was it true that in 4th class the previous year, my teacher had given me a short spot on Thursday afternoons to come out front of the class and entertain. My dad would have supplied me with a joke to tell or a riddle or a tongue twister, something like that. It was only a 5-minute thing and I thought nothing of it. I confirmed to my new teacher that, yes, I had done that. The dynamic in this guy's class was so far removed from the previous year's kindly, musical, friendly lady teacher that it was just the polar opposite. In 4th class, a couple of us even accidentally called our teacher Mum on occasion, much to our embarrassment. Anyway, without warning, one day I was directed to move desks and sit at a single desk directly in front of the teacher's desk at the front of the side. This enabled him to lean forward and speak to me from his desk without the rest of the class hearing anything. Shortly after the move, often when he began to assign classwork for us, he would lean forward and say quietly, "Not you." He would then pass over some other work to me, and I could see that it was Year 3 or even Year 2 stuff. I would usually complete it quickly and would just sit there and have nothing to do. I was consistently being given other work to the rest of the class. He was treating me like I was a remedial student who could not manage the standard 5th class work. For some reason, I did not tell my parents about this. His next step was to start to keep me in after school. At 3:20 p.m, the bell would ring to end the school day and the teacher would dismiss the class. But as I reached down to get my bag, I would turn back to see his face. "Not you." I would immediately start to worry. My beloved mother had struggles with anxiety, particularly concerning the welfare of her sons. If we did not come home from school on time, I knew she would go into worry or panic mode, fearing that we'd been run over or something. When I did return home, her relief was quickly replaced with anger when the late son had to explain their lateness. So I would sit at my desk, and watch as the room quickly emptied. Everyone was gone. I felt hollow. All the energy had left the room. Now the teacher had me all alone. After the very first attention, I knew exactly what to expect. He would not smack my calf. He only did that to me in front of the class. So I knew he wouldn't hurt me physically. I would just sit with my head down and stare at the scratch marks on my single lacquered desk. There'd be a prolonged period of silence. Eventually he would start to speak. His content never varied. He told me that most people were good, and they had good lives and good jobs. Jobs like working in a bank. All my school career, working in a bank was mentioned time and time again as something to aspire to. I'm sorry, but I never had any intention of ever working in banking. He would then say that some people are not good. They were born bad and not fit to live among good people and contaminate them. He told me I was one of those bad people and that I did not deserve to be part of the community of good people. He would then say that if I happened to make it to adulthood without dying or being put in jail, that I should isolate myself from everyone. As a 10-year-old, it conjured up to me a cartoon-like figure with a long beard and wearing a sackcloth garment, living in a cave high up on a mountain somewhere. After his speech, he would always hiss the words, "Now get out of my sight." I would run home to Mum as fast as I could. The conversation was always the same. "Scotty, why are you late? Where have you been? I was worried." "I was kept in, Mum." "Why?" "I don't know, Mum." "You must have done something wrong." "No, Mum, I didn't. I promise." "Well, you must have. He wouldn't keep you in for no reason." "I didn't do anything wrong, Mum." At the end of the term, we were given report cards to take home. This teacher listed the class in order on the report like a top 40 song chart, and the relevant student's report card had their name underlined in red to take home. I was in the bottom half of the class, and, like a song that had faded from airplay very quickly, I knew I was going to drop further down the charts every term. I was being given different work to do. When the class had to do an item for the annual Education Week concert, our teacher had us recite the poem, "The Man from Snowy River," the famous poem from Banjo Patterson. We were to recite it in unison as a class from the stage. We rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed. I still know the poem off by heart. He would conduct our rendition like we were singing. He waved his arms about like he was attempting takeoff. I rehearsed with everyone else in my assigned spot. I was second row, second from left. The school hall was full of parents the afternoon of the big day. Dad was at work, but I knew Mum was going to be there in the hall. When it came to our turn, we all lined up beside the stage, ready to take the steps and take our positions. When the call come, the class moved forward towards the steps. I felt a large hand on my shoulder. In my ear I heard, "Not you." The teacher moved me out of the line at the very last second. I stood at the foot of the steps until the class had finished and took my place again as we marched back to our classroom. The teacher seemed almost happy as he gave the performance his review. While annoyed that more and more people turned to the back of the hall to watch the teacher waving his arms about, the teacher said that he thought it had gone well overall. He then turned and glared at me sitting at my special desk at the front. He pointed his finger at me and said, "And we should all be grateful that Watson chose not to take the stage and ruin it all. Unlike my classmates, I was always referred to by my surname by my teacher, never as Scott. I said nothing, but I was angry for two reasons. First, it was a flat-out lie. Despite his attempts to be subtle about it, many classmates saw him pull me out of the line. I had no intention of doing anything other than recite the poem. There had been no hint that I was about to be removed from the performance. And secondly, he was trying to turn the class against me. By this stage, I knew all this was not over with. When I arrived home after school, Mum was furious. "Why were you not on stage, Scotty?" The teacher told me not to go on stage. "Why? What was the reason?" "I don't know, Mum." "There must be a reason." "Mum, I don't know." By now my father was aware that things had deteriorated to the point that he made an appointment to come and see my teacher. Dad met the teacher outside our classroom as we went to lunch. When Dad finished talking to the teacher, he strode across the playground as we were all sitting eating lunch. When I waved to him, he stopped and turned and pointed to me and yelled, "You wait till I get you home." I was utterly humiliated in front of everyone. Dad was, it seemed, won over by my teacher's pervasive charm and seemed convinced that Mum had accidentally given birth to Rosemary's baby. The teacher had lied spectacularly to my father about how I was a wicked, disruptive influence on the class. At the age of 10, going on 11, I did not possess the ability to argue my case against all this. Disrupting the class? I was scared to do anything at all lest I get my calf smacked again. I was really scared of my teacher, and I was scared of my father. The teacher even took me to task once when I sneezed in class. At my detention later that day, the teacher told me that he knew I sneezed in an effort to distract the class. Once when I was called out to the front of the class to have my calf smacked yet again. No, I honestly don't remember my crime. He hit me particularly hard, and as my leg launched forward on impact, he grabbed my ankle and lifted me up. He then held me dangling upside down by the ankle to amuse the class. My classmates found it all very funny and laughed long and loud as I dangled and swayed. Oh, what fun. The same year, my youngest brother, Dean, had started kindergarten in the infant school. He was 5. One day, while playing with his friends in the playground, he was approached by my teacher. The teacher bent down and asked Dean if he was my brother. When Dean replied that he was, the teacher put his hand on my little brother's shoulder and smacked his calf. The blow knocked Dean clean off his feet, and the little boy landed hard on the asphalt playground, sustaining abrasions. The teacher walked away without a word. By the last term of my school report had me placed not last, but I was in the bottom 3. I was not the only child to have to put up with this man's cruelty. One day, a boy sitting at the back of the class asked to go to the toilet. Permission denied. About 5 minutes later, the boy again raised his hand, but this time the boy's voice was anguished and faltering. "Please, sir, can I go to the toilet?" This time the teacher nodded. The boy ran out of the room. When he reached the door, we all saw the boy's short school pants were soaked. He had wet himself. I spoke about how the teacher would have the class listen to his long orations about whatever subject he felt like talking about that day. One afternoon, the teacher's talk on the inherent dangers of running with scissors was curtailed when a boy fainted at his desk after the teacher's especially visceral description of the damage a scissor could do to an eye. The teacher walked over to where the boy lay, picked up the limp little figure and carried him outside to the classroom veranda. After about 5 minutes, the boy came around and the teacher left the boy to lay outside on a bench. The teacher said, "I think that was due to the heat." "No, it's not that hot. It's your gory storytelling," I thought. Some weeks later, we were subjected to another gruesome story. The same boy who had fainted before vomited this time around. I'm not going to repeat that particular child tragedy story here. Suffice to say it involved a burst high-pressure water pipe, water gushing high into the air, and a little boy who got too close to the jet of water. I'm not even sure if these cautionary tales were true or not. One afternoon, returning to the classroom after lunch, I will admit to a sense of schadenfreude about some classmates. I didn't know all the details, but basically several boys had been outside the school perimeter without permission. The teacher on playground duty sent a student to tell the boys to return, and they refused the request initially. Back in class, the naughty boys copped the fury of our teacher big time. He was livid that any of his students would be so arrogant and disobedient. I just sat there thinking, good, someone else can cop it for once. And these boys, they were not my close friends either. After giving the boys an almighty serve, he suddenly turned to me and yelled, "And if you had been involved with this, Watson, you would be expelled." Expelled? No kid in primary school was ever expelled. And the offence was far short of being something to warrant expulsion. Finally, I thought it was time to talk back. I looked at the teacher and implored him, "Sir, this isn't anything to do with me. I was not there, sir." The year wore on. His attitude towards me didn't change, though he did issue a few more rules for me. One rule was when he left the room for a time, students were allowed to walk about the classroom for whatever reason. He told the class that I was not permitted to leave my seat for any reason, and the class were to report me if I did defy this edict. He then modified that rule. Subsequently, for the remainder of the year, if ever he left the room for any reason, I had to go with him, because he said I could not be trusted in the class alone. What do you think I was going to do? Set fire to the room? Steal his car? Lead the class in a sing-along? So I would walk beside him when he went to drop something off or get some supplies or whatever. He never spoke a single word to me when we were on one of these excursions, ever. When we finally got to the last few weeks of the school year, the children started to bring in the traditional small gifts that were given to class teachers at the end of the school year. After I had seen about half the class bring the teacher their gifts, I asked Mum for a gift I could give to my teacher. Mum was initially very resistant to this idea. "Scotty, he's been very nasty to you. Do you really want to give him a present?" But I insisted. I didn't want to be the only one not giving him a gift. A few days later, I approached his desk and offered my gift wrap set of some handkerchiefs. As I extended the gift to him, for the first and only time, I saw him, he was flustered. He looked embarrassed and taken aback. He glanced away as he took it and said, "Thanks." The year was over. Year 6 consisted of 2 classes, 6A and 6B. 6A was the headmaster's class, and it was for the smart kids. Surprise, surprise, I was in 6B. 6B's teacher was a gruff, large, older man, a year or so from retirement, old school. He was the enforcer who paddled naughty children on the backside when kids were sent to him by teachers on playground duty who policed schoolyard offences. But, like a cliche from any number of ensemble TV shows, underneath his rough exterior, he had a heart of gold, and his genuine love of children was obvious to anyone. His class was fairly boisterous and a lot of fun, to be honest. Plus, there was a girl in the class I had a massive crush on. That fact alone made it a pleasure to go to school. Mid-year, we took our half-yearly exams. About a week after the exams, I was summoned to the headmaster's office. I had no idea what this was all about. The headmaster ushered me into his office, and I noticed my exam papers on his desk. He said he'd been reviewing my work and that much of it was exceptional. He said, "You didn't have a very happy year last year, did you, son?" "No, sir, I didn't." He went on to tell me that my marks put me top of the class by some distance and that he wanted to move me to 6A as soon as possible, but first he had to talk to my parents. He gave me a sealed envelope to take home to Mum and Dad. The following week, Mum and Dad came to the school for an interview with the headmaster. Now, I was not in the room, but later that day, and many times since that meeting, my mother told me exactly what the headmaster said. He began by saying, "Last year your son was done a great disservice. There is absolutely nothing wrong with your son. In fact, he is a very bright boy." He then put down my previous teacher, stating, and Mum assured me he actually said this, that he hated the teacher's guts. Whoa. The headmaster then explained that my fifth class teacher had come to the point in his career where he could apply for promotion via having the opportunity to relieve as a deputy headmaster or even headmaster. The headmaster then told my parents he would refuse to sign the necessary form to enable the teacher to progress in his career. Furthermore, he said he hoped the teacher would leave the profession altogether. So I spent the last 6 months of primary school in 6A with the smarter kids, and I really enjoyed it. After the school holidays, I started high school, as I talked about in the last series. I was placed in a class for advanced students. So, what do we make of all this? First of all, some might wonder whether the whole experience left me hurt, traumatised, broken, and bitter. The answer to that is no. While I freely acknowledge that childhood trauma of many kinds can be hurtful and damaging to those unfortunate enough to be subjected to any form of abuse for whatever reason, I don't believe that what happened to me impacted me personally, other than having to get through it at the time. It was a tough year for sure, particularly from the point when my father appeared to give the teacher's assessment of me a great deal of credence. Children can be very resilient. I think the fact that he had his classroom located so far away from everyone else made it easier for him to get away with behaviour that might have been noticed if he was in the main block. He was a joyless individual. I don't ever recall hearing him laugh. The best I could come up with was that perhaps he thought I was some sort of threat to his absolute rule, and then he was going to make sure I didn't cramp his style at all. I don't know. But let's look at what he tried to do. The indoctrination about being a bad human being he droned on about during my many detentions didn't work. I never believed any of that nonsense. Likewise, his attempts at various intervals to turn my classmates against me was an abject failure as well. When I wasn't at my special desk, I was out playing soccer and cricket with my friends and just part of the gang. No one shunned me. He did succeed in slowing me down academically, though, but that was only temporary. This was, a speed bump in an otherwise happy childhood. I have no idea what happened to the teacher subsequently. If there's a hero in this story, it is, of course, the headmaster. He saw what had happened and took decisive action to set things right. And I'm thankful for that. The person who suffered the most was my beloved mother. After the interview, and on several occasions in my adult life, Mum would recount the headmaster's words in that office in 1966. She would then say, "Scotty, I feel guilty that I didn't know exactly what was going on. If I did, I would have done something earlier to stop you being treated so badly. I hope you can forgive me, but I always loved you, Scotty." I know, Mum. I never doubted that for a moment.